One of the world's most beautiful cities, St. Petersburg has all the ingredients for an unforgettable travel experience. Masterpieces of art, magnificent architecture, an extraordinary history and rich cultural traditions that have inspired and nurtured some of the modern world's greatest names in literature, music, and the visual arts. A walk down Nevsky Prospekt, the main avenue of St. Petersburg, is a walk into the heart of the new Russia. A buzzing, swirling mishmash of new and colorful shops, restaurants, bars, cinemas, art galleries, international banks and perfumeries, packed overflowing with tourists and locals, workers and beggars, people selling items from pets to shoes, and scam artists, all pushing their way through the crowd on their way to the action. A city of palaces and museums, broad avenues, and winding canals, St. Petersburg's short history has endowed the city with a wealth of architectural and artistic treasures. European and world culture are reflected in its more than 4,000 ensembles and monuments, 250 museums, 50 theaters, and 80 art galleries. The Cathedral of Our Lady of Kazan is considered a masterpiece of high classical architecture and a brilliant example of the synthesis of the arts. The cathedral was built on an enormous scale and boasts an impressive stone colonnade, which encircles a small garden and central fountain. Inspired by the Basilica of St. Peter's in Rome, it was built to serve as the country's primary Orthodox church. The cathedral's highly artistic interior decoration, consisting of 56 monolithic red granite columns and a mosaic floor composed of multicolored Karelian marble, is bound to produce an unforgettable impression on the visitor. Still considered Russia's cultural capital, St. Petersburg reflects the country's extraordinary fate like no other city, and its uniquely rich atmosphere exerts a powerful grip on even the most jaded traveler. The main square of St. Petersburg and one of the world's most magnificent public plazas, Palace Square contains the picturesque Baroque buildings of the Winter Palace and Hermitage Museum on one side, and the classical yellow and white former General Staff buildings of the Russian Army on the other. Palace Square offers an excellent example of how different architectural styles can be combined in a most elaborate and aesthetically pleasing way. The square was the setting of many events of worldwide significance, including Bloody Sunday in 1905 and the October Revolution of 1917. This imposing square, designed by Italian architect Carlo Rossi, overlooks the Hermitage's main entrance. The buildings are designed in the neoclassical style and perfectly match the palace in their scale, rhythm, and monumentality. Curving an incredible 580 meters around the south side of the square is the General Staff Building of the Russian Army. The two great blocks are joined by a triumphal arch over Bolshaya Morskaya Ul. The arch is topped by the Chariot of Glory drawn by 6 horses, a monument to the Napoleonic Wars. The Alexander Column is the focal point of Palace Square and was built to commemorate the triumphant victory of the Russians over Napoleon in the Patriotic War of 1812. It is a terrific feat of engineering that this enormous column, weighing an incredible 600 tons, was erected in under 2 hours without the aid of modern cranes or engineering machines. The magnificent green, white, and gold Winter Palace is superbly situated on the banks of the Neva River. This 200-meter-long building in the Russian Baroque style, once the official residence of the Tsars, is the biggest and most lavishly decorated palace in the city. Catherine the Great later added the small and large hermitages onto the palace as a sanctuary for herself and her private art collection. The southern facade overlooking the square has a formal grandeur. Here, the architect pierced the building with 3 arches to create a grand entrance into the courtyard and accentuated it with the vertical elements of paired columns. Developing upon one and the same architectural motif, architect Francesco Rastrelli gave each of the 4 facades of the palace a different structural rhythm. The palace consists of 4 large blocks stretching between the square and the embankment. Together they contain the main state apartments and more than 1,000 halls and rooms. The magnificent Baroque imprint of the palace's original appearance has survived to the present day, and has gone down in history as one of Rastrelli's masterpieces. The facades are each embellished by a two-tiered colonnade. Forming a complex rhythm of verticals, the columns soar upwards, a motion which embraces the numerous statues and vases on the roof. The abundance of molded decoration, fanciful cornices and window architraves, mascarons, cartouches, rocailles, and a variety of pediments creates an extremely rich play of light and shadow that endows the building with its magnificent appearance. The Hermitage Museum comprises a stately complex of buildings set out along the embankment, with the Winter Palace at its heart. Now one of the world's greatest art museums, it grew from a small collection of paintings started by Catherine the Great to a massive display of over 3 million items, housed within the sumptuous splendor of one of the most luxurious palaces in the world. The museum's 3 floors cover a full range of world art from ancient times, through Russian works and 20th century Europe, to a fabulous collection of Impressionist and Post-Impressionist paintings, set against the rich interior of white marble staircases, golden ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and elaborate mosaics. The main staircase of the Winter Palace has 2 broad flights of marble steps, leading up to a landing embellished with gray granite columns. The staircase is adorned with statues, some of which were brought from Italy during the reign of Peter the Great. Light-filled and gleaming with gilding and mirrors, the staircase extends the entire height of the Winter Palace. Constructed following the wishes of Catherine II, the Raphael Loggias in the Hermitage are a copy of the famous gallery created in the 16th century in the Vatican Palace by the architect Donato Bramante. Its walls and vaults were painted by Raphael's pupils after his sketches and under his supervision. The Raphael Loggias form an integral ensemble displaying a harmony of architecture, painting, and sculpture. The gallery consists of 13 identical sections, each with its own vault. The decoration of the gallery embodies a typical Renaissance tendency to reveal the connection between classical antiquity and Christianity. Under the impression of the decorative classical ornamentation, Raphael produced compositions combining unusual images with motifs taken from real life. Italian sculpture of the 15th through the 20th centuries is represented by a modest but significant collection in the museum. The Hermitage has a remarkable collection of 15 works by the most prominent Italian sculptor of the late 18th to early 19th centuries, Antonio Canova. Here is his work, The Three Graces. The statue of Cupid and Psyche illustrates the variety of subjects which attracted the master Canova. From the second quarter of the 16th century, master armorers created works that display a variety and refinement of decorative finishes that match the artistic style characteristic of the applied art of the time. In the first half of the 16th century, they used a wide repertoire of ornament and ancient motifs in the Renaissance style, and then the Baroque. By the end of the century, there was a clear tendency towards more complex decorative and technical approaches, and florid embellishment linked to the spread of Mannerism. The Hermitage's superb collection of modern European art, the bulk of which is made up of French Impressionist and Post-Impressionist painting, is divided between those works that were received into the Hermitage collections after the Revolution, and art seized from Germany after the Second World War. The former are displayed on the museum's third floor and include some of the world's largest collections of works by Picasso and Matisse. The Impressionist masterpieces in the collection include several major works by Monet. The Pavillon Hall of the small Hermitage was designed by Andrei Stackenschneider, the most important Russian architect of the eclecticism style. The design of this interior combines architectural elements of classical antiquity, Renaissance, and the Orient. The combination of light-colored marble with gilt stucco ornaments and the glittering 28 crystal chandeliers makes it particularly impressive. Among the items on exhibit that never fail to attract visitors' attention is a peacock clock from the collection of Catherine the Great. The main staircase of the new Hermitage once served as the entrance to the museum before the October Revolution of 1917. The upper gallery of the staircase is adorned with 20 gray Cerbydol granite columns and features 19th century European sculpture and Russian lapidary works. The museum complex also includes the Menshikov Palace and the eastern wing of the General Staff Building, the Staraya Derevnya Restoration and Storage Center, and the Museum of the Imperial Porcelain Factory. St. Petersburg is often described by locals as a Gorod Muzei, the museum city, and for good reason. Peter the Great himself founded the city's first museum, the extraordinary Kunstkammer, for the edification of his subjects, and the city now boasts over 100 museums, ranging from the vast Hermitage, one of the world's most famous galleries, to small apartment museums honoring some of Russia's greatest writers. The 6 buildings of the Hermitage form an impressive facade along the embankment of the Neva River. St.Isaac Square is a sprawling urban square located between the Mariinsky Palace and St. Isaac's Cathedral. The square is graced by the equestrian monument of Tsar Nicholas I. The monument to the iron-willed and notoriously despotic Russian ruler Nicholas I on St. Isaac Square was built by renowned French architect Auguste de Montferrand. Montferrand also built nearby St. Isaac's Cathedral, in itself an architectural marvel. St. Isaac's Square got its name from the magnificent Cathedral of St. Isaac. The dome of St. Isaac's Cathedral dominates the skyline of St. Petersburg, and its gleaming gilded cupola can be seen from all over the city. St. Isaac's Cathedral is one of the largest dome structures in the world, and today remains the world's 4th highest cathedral. With an area of some 4,000 square meters, the cathedral can accommodate up to 14,000 standing worshippers at a time. "48 monolithic columns of massive marble carved from solid marble monoliths, weighing 114 tons each, were erected to form the porticos. The cathedral is decorated with sculptures both inside and out. In all, about 400 meters of high sculptural work was created. It was the first time that the newly developed galvanoplastic technology was used for making monumental sculptures, which allowed the massive statues to be only millimeters in thickness and thus very lightweight. The Bronze Horseman, an impressive monument to the founder of St. Petersburg, Peter the Great, stands facing the Neva River and surrounded by the Admiralty, St. Isaac's Cathedral, and the buildings of the former Senate and Synod, the civil and religious governing bodies of pre-revolutionary Russia. St. Petersburg's debatable status as the Venice of the North is boosted by the fact that the city, like its Italian counterpart, is almost entirely built on a series of islands. Many of them are, of course, only nominally islands, separated one from another by narrow canals or rivers, and connected by the city's bridges to form two seemingly continuous strips of land along the banks of the Neva. Some, however, are clearly separate from the rest of St. Petersburg, with a distinctive character or unique historic function that makes them of particular interest to visitors exploring the city. Bridges are an essential part of St. Petersburg's architectural makeup, unsurprisingly considering that the city is built on over 100 islands. Among the city's over 500 bridges are numerous architectural and technological masterpieces. The Menshikov Palace is a stunning residence built in the early 1700s for the Governor-General of St. Petersburg, Alexander Menshikov. Now home to a branch of the State Hermitage Museum and a magnificent collection of Russian cultural artifacts from the 18th century, it was one of the first stone mansions in St. Petersburg. The Menshikov Palace combines elements of Russian and Western European architecture. Some parts of the palace are reminiscent of palazzos from the Italian Renaissance, while the decoration of the roofs is more typical of the Russian style. The palace was named for Alexander Menshikov, advisor to Peter the Great, who also served as de facto ruler of Russia for 2 years under Empress Catherine I. From humble origins, Menshikov was able to bring himself to the pinnacles of Russian power through his advocacy of Petrine reform. More than once, however, his greed and penchant for corruption earned him the Tsar's anger and nearly cost him his life. The Neva River is an essential part of St. Petersburg's charm. Generations of locals and visitors to the city have been enraptured by long evening walks along the banks of the Neva. Since the foundation of the city, the Neva was intended to be its main street. Throughout most of the 18th century, there was no bridges across the river, and people were ferried from one bank to the other, just as Peter the Great intended when he founded his Venice of the North. Very few things can be more romantic than taking a boat ride along the Neva's granite-clad embankments and admiring the city's open bridges, the marvelous architecture, and the large ships as they pass by. Small rivers and canals dissect the historic center of St. Petersburg, and it's hard to walk more than a few hundred meters without crossing a bridge. The Trinity Bridge is one of St. Petersburg's most famous bascule bridges, with a gorgeous Art Nouveau design that was in part the work of Gustave Eiffel. Virtually unscathed by the period of Stalinist reconstruction from the 1930s until the 1950s, the center of St. Petersburg is crowded with splendid palaces, impressive historical monuments, tree-lined avenues, and beautiful bridges. Although not yet 300 years old, St. Petersburg is a city with a wealth of historical and cultural associations and a refined air of mystery. Created by Peter the Great in 1703 to be his window on Europe, St. Petersburg combines its fascinating Russian heritage with a distinctly European outlook. Considered the cultural heart of modern-day Russia, St. Petersburg is rapidly regaining its reputation as one of Europe's great cities. From the vibrant colors of spring, through the sunny summer days and the endless twilights of the famous white nights, the brilliant golden sun of autumn, and into the brittle brightness of a St. Petersburg winter, the city casts its own unique spell over visitors. The capital of the Russian Empire for 200 years, St. Petersburg has connected Russia with Europe throughout its history. Today, the interests of world politics, business, and culture meet on the banks of the Neva River. Thanks to its breathtaking beauty, St. Petersburg has always stirred the emotions and been a source of artistic inspiration, in particular for literature, so much so that the city seems to have been created just for that purpose. It is a melting pot of lifestyles, cultural currents, and settings that at times seem to clash. It will leave a deep impression on you, even if some part of it will inevitably escape your understanding. St. Petersburg's original citadel is the Peter and Paul Fortress, built to protect Peter the Great's northern city from the threat of Swedish attacks, and now the resting place of many of the Russian Tsars. Today, the fortress is one of St. Petersburg's major tourist attractions and has become the emblem of the city. It is also home to the headquarters of the St. Petersburg City History Museum, which displays its collections throughout the fortress complex. In the middle of the fortress stands the impressive Peter and Paul Cathedral, the burial place of all the Russian emperors and empresses from Peter the Great to Alexander III. The cathedral was the first church in the city to be built of stone, and its design is curiously unusual for a Russian Orthodox church. On top of the cathedral's gilded spire stands a magnificent golden angel holding a cross. This weather vane is one of the most prominent symbols of St. Petersburg, and at 123 meters, the cathedral is the tallest building in the city. Some of St. Petersburg's greatest buildings are its Russian Orthodox cathedrals and churches. Although stone churches were built in St. Petersburg over a span of little more than 100 years, the range of architectural styles is breathtaking. From the elegant charms of the early Baroque to the staggering ornamentation of the Russian Revival. Built on the spot where Emperor Alexander II was assassinated in 1881, The Church of Our Savior on the Spilled Blood is a lively profusion of brightly colored onion domes, glittering spires, and a breathtakingly detailed mosaic interior. With its distinctive cupolas, the Muscovy design is unique in St. Petersburg and provides a dramatic contrast to the neoclassical architecture which dominates the city center. Its design in the pseudo-Russian style resembles St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow's Red Square. The church is decorated with mosaics both inside and out, the work of the most prominent Russian artists of the time. Christ and the apostles are depicted within the cupola, while the walls and pillars are completely covered with mosaics, portraying biblical scenes or images of saints. Mosaics cover the niches, crevices, and cornices. Indeed, no surface is left bare of embellishment. There are almost 7,000 square meters of Italian marble and over 20 different Russian minerals, embellished with opulent mosaics based on paintings and other religious artwork of the late 19th century. No visit to St. Petersburg is complete without a trip to at least one of the world-famous imperial palaces in the city's suburbs. A showcase for the wealth and tastes of the Russian emperors from Peter the Great onwards. These extraordinary estates boast sumptuous palaces, extensive landscape gardens, and a treasury of art and history. One of St. Petersburg's most famous and popular visitor attractions, the palace and park at Peterhof are often referred to as the Russian Versailles. The chapel of Peterhof Palace was attached to the far end of the facade. This was the traditional baptismal church of the Tsars' children, and each one of Nicholas's and Alexandra's children was brought here in turn. The spectacular park at Peterhof is remarkable for the sheer variety of styles encompassed in its layout and features. Representing nearly 2 centuries of European aristocratic fashion executed to the highest standards, Peterhof is like an encyclopedia of park design through the Age of Empire. Particularly impressive is the fact that the master landscapers and garden designers who worked on the estate at Peterhof managed to overcome the extremely inclement conditions of the northern climate to create a wonderland of greenery and flowers, sweeping vistas, and ornate architectural decorations. Another building that dates from the era of Peter the Great, this charming mansion was inspired by the French Royal Hunting Lodge at Marly-le-Roi. Fountains were intrinsic to Peter the Great's original plans for Peterhof, and successive generations competed with their predecessors to add grander and ever more ingenious water features to the parkland surrounding the Grand Palace. Peterhof may be most famous for its remarkable array of decorative fountains, including the unmistakable and incredibly impressive ensemble of the Grand Cascade. It has 64 different fountains and over 200 bronze statues, bas-reliefs, and other decorations. Empress Elizabeth's Grand Palace is not particularly large, but it has an imposing facade and some stunning staterooms inside. St. Petersburg is the only city in the world which was included on the Unesco list of World Heritage Sites as a monument of architecture and culture, urban planning and landscape art from the 18th and 19th centuries.